Hello everyone, welcome to ACE Anesthesia. So today's video will be discussing about neuromuscular monitoring. Okay, in this video we'll be seeing what is the definition of a neuromuscular monitor. We'll see what are the basic principles of a nerve stimulator. We'll see what are the various types of the nerve stimulating electrodes available. What are the various sites which is used for monitoring the neuromuscular monitoring. Then what are the various patterns of the nerve stimulation, that is both qualitative and quantitative, and the uses of a nerve stimulator. So what is neuromuscular monitoring? It is to elicit the magnitude of the neuromuscular blockade by giving the stimulus in the form of an electrical stimulus. Okay, electrical stimulus is given and the response is seen in the form of a muscle contraction is called as the neuromuscular monitoring. Okay, so what are the basic principles of a nerve stimulator? So when it comes to the nerve stimulator, it follows what is called as the Ohm's law. Okay, Ohm's law states that voltage is equal to current into resistance, keeping resistance, which is nothing but the resistance of the skin contact, constant. So voltage will be equal to the current that is applied. So whenever there is a nerve stimulator, certain things have to be kept in mind. First is what is a supramaximal stimulus. Okay, so it is the maximum current. So what is a maximal stimulus? It is a maximum current which causes contraction of all the muscle fibers. So remember that this muscle fibers always follow all or none phenomenon, and the force of contraction depends upon the number of the muscle fibers that is contracting. So the maximum amount of current is that is required to cause the contraction of all the muscle fibers and produce a maximum response is called as maximal stimulus. Okay, supramaximal stimulus will be about 20 to 25% more than that of the maximal stimulus is called as supramaximal stimulus. Another thing which you have to remember is about the calibration of the device. Calibration should be within the measurable range. Third is we have to also know about the impedance. Impedance is basically the resistance which is offered by the skin to the nerve stimulator, that is the electrical current is called as the impedance. Right? After this, one more thing which we have to remember, that the range in which the neuromuscular monitoring will work is only when 70 to 75% of the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors are blocked by the neuromuscular blockers, is only when the action, or we will be able to tell the, or we will be able to do the neuromuscular monitoring. Okay, so next we come to the various types of the nerve stimulator that is present. So nerve stimulators which are present, they may be electrical nerve stimulator or they can be magnetic nerve stimulator. Okay, so electrical nerve stimulator is what we use in our daily life. These are very handy to use but they are painful, whereas magnetic nerve stimulator have very bulky equipments and they are difficult to use and also difficult to achieve supramaximal stimulus using a magnetic nerve stimulator. Coming to next is the stimulating electrode. So we finished with definition, principles, types, and now coming to the stimulating electrodes. The stimulating electrodes can be gel or surface based electrodes, right? They can be needle electrodes or they can be metal electrodes. Okay, so gel or surface based electrodes, so these type is like what we use everyday life. They have like a center metal followed with a gel and followed with an adhesive patch, that is the gel or the surface based electrodes. Needle electrodes are those which contains needles. So needles are placed along the path of the nerve along the subcutaneous tissue, right? Gel-based electrodes are superficial or surface electrodes. Needle electrodes are placed along the nerve in the subcutaneous tissue or in the vicinity of the nerve. When it is used, needle-based electrodes are used when there is lot of edema in obese patients or in patient of burns where surface electrodes won't work much. Next, coming to the metal electrodes, which comes like in direct contact with the skin of the patient, right? There may be a positive, negative, and these kind of bulky electrodes are the metal electrodes that are available, right? So next we come to what are the various monitoring sites that are present of the neuromuscular monitoring. So in the hand, in the volar aspect of the hand, okay, we place the surface electrodes or these electrodes for the ulnar nerve, and the response is seen in the form of the muscle which responds to this is adductor pollicis. Okay, so we keep if this is the hand, right? So there is one electrode placed here, other electrode placed here. This is on the palmar surface like this, okay? On the palmar surface, on the volar aspect, it is kept. So for the proximal one is the positive electrode, which is usually red in color, and the distal one, which is the negative electrode, which is black in color. Okay, so these are the two electrodes. The sites of monitoring in the hand, most common it will be the ulnar nerve, which is used, and the responsive muscle to this is adductor pollicis. In the leg we have posterior tibial nerve, and the responding muscle to that is flexor hallucis brevis. Okay, and other nerves which can also be used as a median nerve, or we can also use the common peroneal nerve, or we can also use the facial nerve. Facial nerve, the response is seen in the form of corrugator supercilii or orbicularis oculi muscle. So these are the various monitoring sites that are used in case of nerve stimulator. Right. So whenever we place these electrodes, there should be a distance of about 3 to 6 centimeter. Right. And always remember that before applying these gel or the surface electrodes, it has to be wiped clean with an alcohol swab, dried properly for proper contact of these gel based electrodes. Okay, right. So next we will see that what is the ideal site which we choose for monitoring, for the neuromuscular monitoring is, first is it should be away from the surgical field, right? And second is that it should be visible, as well as tactile motion should be visible to the anesthetist. NIBP and pulse oximeter should be on separate limbs, and also you can avoid, and you should also avoid placing it any of the paralytic limb if it is used for neuromuscular monitoring. So these are the simple things to be kept in mind for the selection of the site of placement of these electrodes, right? So what is the ideal nerve stimulator? Ideal nerve stimulator is the one which is able to deliver a wide range of current, right? And it's also should be able to give stimulus within a short duration of time, that is 0.2 to 0.3 millisecond, and also should also be able to deliver the current constantly over wide range of skin resistance. Will be an ideal nerve stimulator. So next we'll be seeing about the test for the neuromuscular monitoring, qualitative tests that includes mainly single twitch, train of 4 monitoring, tetanic and post-tetanic count, and the double burst stimulus. Okay, so starting with what is single twitch. Single twitch is single stimulus which is being provided at a frequency of 1 hertz or 0.1 hertz. So 1 hertz means 1 event per second, or 0.1 hertz is 0.1 that is 1 event every 10 seconds. So whenever there is a stimulus that is provided, we will have a single twitch. So this is called as the single twitch, and this kind of stimulus there is a fixed amplitude. So this kind of single twitch, it is used for measuring the supramaximal stimulus. Okay, to identify the supramaximal stimulus, we use a single twitch. But what are the disadvantages of the single twitch is that it cannot differentiate between a depolarizing or a non-depolarizing muscle relaxant. And another thing is that it also cannot tell us about the reversal from the neuromuscular blocking agent. So it is just used to determine the supramaximal stimulus. So the height or the amplitude is basically recorded with the help of the supramaximal stimulus. Okay. So next, coming to one of the important things, that is the train of 4 monitoring. In train of 4, we will give 4 supramaximal stimulus, right, at a frequency of 2 Hz. So 4 supramaximal stimulus, right, that is given over 2 seconds. That is, there is T1, T2, T3 and T4. So there is basically 4 stimulus that is given, which is separated by 0.5 seconds each. So this is the train of 4 monitoring. So one important thing which we have to remember in TOF is what is called as the train of 4 ratio. Okay, train of 4 ratio is basically the amplitude of the T4 divided by amplitude of T1. That is called as the train of 4 ratio, right? So when all the 4 are present, we can calculate the train of 4 ratio. If one of this is absent, that is either T4 or T1, whatever, one of this is also absent, then we have to know what is called as train of 4 count. Okay. So I have drawn 2 graphs. Okay. One, you can see that there is a gradual decrease in this amplitude. In other one, we can see that there are 4 responses of equal amplitude. Okay. So this is seen in non-depolarizing muscle relaxant. Okay. So this is called as phenomenon of fade. Okay, that is seen in case of non-depolarizing muscle relaxant, whereas this is seen in case of depolarizing muscle relaxant. So here we see that the effect of the stimulus, the amplitude will decrease because of the depolarizing agent, but there is no phenomenon of fade. If you see phenomenon of fade, then that means it is a phase 2 block because of the depolarizing agent. Okay. So once we have finished with this TOF, right, we will have to correlate all of this. I'll tell you in future while coming throughout this video. So this phenomenon of fade is seen in case of non-depolarizing, whereas decrease in amplitude to the stimulus is seen in case of a depolarizing muscle relaxant. The TOF ratio is the ratio between the amplitude of fourth to the amplitude of the first. Okay. Next we move on to what is tetanic stimulus. Tetanic stimulus is a high frequency stimulus which is given over a short period of time. Okay, in tetanic stimulus, we give like the frequency is about 50 Hertz over 5 seconds. So here like 50 contractions will be there within 5 seconds. That is called as the tetanic stimulus. Okay, here also the phenomenon of fade in tetanic stimulus will be seen in a non-depolarizing muscle relaxant, whereas it will be only of decreased amplitude because of the depolarizing muscle relaxant. So what happens in a tetanic stimulus, that there will be vigorous extensive stimuli causing extreme high amount of release of acetylcholine in the neuromuscular junction. So what happens that whenever there is an action because of the neuromuscular blocking agent, but in spite of this, so much amount of the acetylcholine is released that you can still have contraction after the tetanic stimulus. Okay, so that is the margin of safety which is overcome when we are using a muscle relaxant. So what is post tetanic count? Post tetanic count is nothing but like single twitches, about 10 to 15 single twitches. Okay, they are given from 3 seconds to 2 minutes duration after a tetanic stimulus, that is called as the post tetanic count. So post tetanic count is the advantage is that it helps us to determine intense and deep block. Okay, especially in surgeries which requires extreme depth of anesthesia, where there should not be any movement to tracheal stimulation or diaphragmatic movement, we have to see for the post tetanic count. Okay, so after this we come to double burst stimulation. Double burst stimulation means we give two tetanic stimuli. Okay, this will be either in the form of 3:3 or 3:2. Right, this is separated by 750 milliseconds, and each of this stimuli will be 0.2 second duration. Okay, so in this double burst stimulation, right, in double burst stimulation, we have used two tetanic stimulus of 50 hertz, okay, that is separated by 750 millisecond, and each of its duration will be 0.2 milliseconds, okay, 0.2 milliseconds. So this is the double burst stimulation. The advantage is that it has better tactile and visual response compared to that of the train of 4 monitoring. So in this next we'll be seeing about how to correlate the post-tetanic count, TOF count and TOF ratios, and which will help us to determine the various depths of the block. Okay, so let's start with intense block. So intense block is immediately after giving this neuromuscular agent, where our post-tetanic count will be 0. Right, so in such a situation, the neostigmine cannot be used to reverse the intense block, and Sugammadex dose that is required is about 16 milligram per kg. Right. So next we come to what is called as the deep block. In deep block, the post-tetanic count will be 1. Okay, and the TOF which is present count may or may not come. That is, it will be usually absent. So such a deep block is such a block is called as the deep block. Here also neostigmine cannot be used to reverse the neuromuscular blockade, right? Whereas Sugammadex is used at the dose of 4 milligram per kg. Next we come to moderate block. So in moderate block is when the post-tetanic count of 6 to 10 appears, and TOF count may range from 1 to 3. So the TOF counts have start appearing. So in this situation, neostigmine, which is an acetylcholine esterase inhibitor, can be used at the dosage of 0.05 milligram per kg, or Sugammadex at a dose of 2 milligram per kg. Right. So coming towards the reversal side, that is towards the extubation side, we will see for what is called as the TOF ratio. Right. So TOF ratio will apply when all the 4 TOF counts have come. That is, all the 4 T1, T2, T3, T4 has come. That's when we calculate the TOF ratio. TOF ratio of around 0.4, 0.6, 0.7, 0.9. So these are some basic around values which we have to know what happens. In 0.4 of TOF ratio, what happens is that patient will be having some kind of efforts, but their inspiratory pressures and vital capacity will still not be adequate. Okay. Whereas in 0.6, patient will be having a head lift of about 3 seconds. Patient will be able to protrude tongue. Okay. And they will also have good amount of efforts of breathing, okay, but their vital capacity as well as inspiratory pressure will still be insufficient. Whereas at point 7, we see that patient will be able to cough. They'll have a head lift of about 5 seconds. Still, the inspiratory pressure will not be adequate. So it is a TOF ratio of 0.9 and above that patient can be extubated successfully without any residual neuromuscular blockade. Okay, so what happens that whenever we are giving a neuromuscular blocking agent, okay, the first to disappear will be T4. This will happen at about 70 to 75% of the neuromuscular blockade. Second to disappear will be the T3, and which will be at about 80 to 85%, whereas T2 will disappear about 90 to 95% of the neuromuscular blocking agent. So once one T4 disappears, we cannot calculate TOF ratio. We have to start counting the TOF count. Okay, right. So next we'll be seeing about the quantitative methods for the nerve stimulator detection. That includes mechanomyography, electromyography, acceleromyography, and kinemyography. So in mechanomyography, there is there is a fixed preload that is attached to the thumb of about 200 to 300 grams. Okay, so this preload produces isometric contraction of the muscle, and that produces this contraction is basically detected by the signals. Okay, and they will be represented quantitatively. So this is mechanomyography. Next comes to electromyography, where electrical stimulus will be applied to the muscles which are present on the thenar and hypothenar eminences. There may be usually 3 stimulating electrodes, one placed on the muscle, one on the tendon, and one is a grounding electrode. And these signals are detected by our electrodes, and the signal is then represented in the form of voltage signals. Okay, next we have acceleromyography. Acceleromyography, where the isotonic contraction of the muscle fiber is detected by the piezoelectric wafer that is present or placed over the hand. Okay, so this will be help in detecting the voltage signals. Next is kinemyography, where the movement of thumb against the finger is detected the contraction is directly proportional to the bending of this piezoelectric wafer that is present, and here the signal is basically detected. So these are the quantitative methods for measuring the neuromuscular monitoring. So next we come to what are the uses of the neuromuscular monitoring. It is very useful for the purpose of induction and for knowing the depth of the neuromuscular blocking agent. It is also very useful for the reversal of the neuromuscular blocking agent, and also for the criteria for extubation, right? And it's also useful in patients, especially where liver and renal transplant or renal diseases patients are there, where the pharmacodynamics and kinetics of the neuromuscular blocking agent alters significantly, right? It's also very useful in conditions with phase 2 block caused by the depolarizing muscle relaxant. So when we come to this kind of criteria for this extubation, clinically we'll be seeing about the criteria like sustained head lift for 5 seconds or hand grip for 5 seconds, ability to protrude the tongue, eye opening for 3 seconds, ability to generate an inspiratory pressure of more than 25 centimeter of water, and also adequate tidal volume and respiratory rate or breaths. Okay, but using this TOF monitoring, we'll be able to accurately tell about the neuromuscular blockade level, and also we can tell us about the depth of the neuromuscular agent that is being given, right? So in case of surgeries which require very deep block, also this TOF monitoring is quite useful. So how do we actually use the neuromuscular monitoring agent? So neuromuscular monitor, first is like if you are undergoing a patient under general anesthesia, so we can give the inducing agent, we can give a single twitch. By single twitch, we'll be able to calculate the supramaximal stimulus, right? So once we obtain this single twitch, we can give the depolarizing or the non-depolarizing muscle relaxant, and we can look for the either the single twitch or the TOF, that is train of 4 monitoring. Once that is seen, we can go for endotracheal intubation, and with the to increase the depth of the neuromuscular blockade, we can give the agents. As I discussed previously, we can see for the post-tetanic count, TOF count, and then TOF ratios gradually during the surgery and towards the reversal side. So in this video, we have discussed about the neuromuscular monitoring. We have discussed about the various types of electrodes, the sites of monitoring, and the important methods of qualitative and quantitative type of neuromuscular monitoring. I've also tried to explain how to use and compare the neuromuscular monitor to see for the depth of the neuromuscular blockade. I hope this video was very useful. Keep supporting. Thank you.